Today is Thursday, February 20th, 2025, and welcome in to episode number 2 of the Rounding Third podcast here at Big Fan Sports. I'm your host, Jaden Harper. So on Tuesday, we did the AL East preview, so today we're going to focus on the other East Division residing in the National League. But before we get started, make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload a video, and I will also be live on Sunday when the Orioles take on the Phillies at 1:05 Eastern Time, so make sure to not miss that. So let's get started with the National League East, which is clearly the worst team in the division is the Miami Marlins. They're really bad. This is one of the worst teams in Major League Baseball. They would be the worst team in Major League Baseball, in my opinion, if it wasn't for the Chicago White Sox. So they couldn't even be the best at being the worst. They are a really bad team. They finally spent money this offseason re-signing Cal Quantrill. Signing Cal Quantrill. They did it a couple weeks ago. That was really one of the only moves they made this whole offseason. They are $30 million under where the MLB and the Players Association need them to be in the threshold. They are in a really bad position. They're going to come in last. I would be shocked if they won 70 games this year. That's how bad of a team they are. Honestly, I think they could win less than 65 games this year. That's how bad of a team they are. They are a really, really, really bad team. I've seen, obviously, bad teams over the years. The White Sox were really bad. Honestly, I think the Marlins might be worse than the White Sox. So get Sandy Alcantara back, which will be something to watch. He might potentially get moved at the deadline. It's honestly more about who could get moved at the deadline than what the season is going to look like. They lost Jake Burger this offseason. They traded him to Texas. Lost Jesus Luzardo this offseason. Traded him to the Phillies. They just had a really bad offseason. Another bad season. They traded Jazz Chisholm at last year's trade deadline. It's just been bad after making the playoffs back in 2023. That was not that long ago. That's only really a season and a half ago that they made the playoffs, and now they're the worst team in Major League Baseball. They traded away Jazz Chisholm. They traded away Luis Arias. They traded away Luzardo. Braxton Garrett's now injured. Alcantara missed most of 2024, right? And now the team is in a really bad position. Sandy Alcantara, they haven't talked about moving him, but potentially he could be a name to watch to get moved at the 2025 trade deadline. So we'll see what happens, but the Marlins are a really, really bad team, so they come in at number 5 right now in the National League East. At number 4, I'd say it's the Washington Nationals. They're a team that I could see being a very sleeper-ish Detroit Tigers team from last year, right, where the Tigers, no one had any expectations for them, and they ended up going to the playoffs, almost going to the ALCS. I think the Nationals have the pieces to do it. They're a very, very young team, and they have good pieces like James Wood. They have Jacob Young out in center field. Dylan Cruz will get his first full year in the MLB out in right. That's a great outfield, young outfield right there. In the infield, you have C.J. Abrams, who was an all-star last year. Luis Garcia, who could have been an all-star last year, he had an incredible season at the plate last year for the Washington Nationals. And then they also trade for first baseman Nathaniel Lau, who was with the World Series champion Texas Rangers just 2 years ago. And the Nationals have a good rotation, too. They re-signed Trevor Williams this offseason to go along with Mackenzie Gore, Jake Irvin, and they have a couple other pieces, Mitchell Parker, a couple other pieces in that Washington rotation. Obviously, they ended up losing out on Christian Walker. Interesting article came out about how the Nationals owner nixed the deal to potentially bring Christian Walker on the top first baseman on the market to Washington. They settled for Nathaniel Lau, which isn't a bad settling for when you look at it, but you could have had Christian Walker. So the Nationals are in a position where they could be a sneaky underdog team that we saw in the Detroit Tigers this past year, and we've seen each year with this, especially with the expanded playoffs. For example, like with the Arizona Diamondbacks back in 2023, they went all the way to the World Series. So each year you have this underdog type team to make the playoffs, and this year, right now, from what it's looking like, I think it can be the Washington Nationals. They have a good team. They have a team that can win a lot. Will they win a lot? They're still growing as a team. I think 2026 is going to be a big year in Washington, D.C. If they have a decent year this year, let's say they win 80 games, let's say they win 75 games. If they could do that, then that could maybe show the owners that, yeah, let's go out and spend money this offseason. Let's get the pieces that we need to contend. And then in 2026, the Nationals, who were World Series champions just a short 5-6 years ago, could be back in contending. after, really tearing everything down and rebuilding from the bottom, and they've done it pretty quickly. When you look at the beginning of the 2021 season, they had names like Trey Turner, Juan Soto, Kyle Schwarber, Max Scherzer, Steven Strasburg as everyday guys. None of them are on the team now. They've really taken everybody from that 2019 team. I could be wrong. I don't think anybody from that 2019 team is still in Washington as of right now. So it's going to be interesting to see what they could do this year. They're going to have an underdog placement, really. Most people don't think they could do anything. I could see the Nationals potentially making the postseason this year. They have the pieces to do it. They have C.J. Abrams, James Wood, Dylan Cruz, Jacob Young, Luis Garcia, one of the most underrated players in baseball. The Nationals, if they could get hot at the right time, they could, win games, take games from the Mets, take games in division games, take games against other big National League teams. I could see the Washington Nationals making the playoffs in 2025. They have the rotation to do it. If they go out, trade deadline, get a third baseman, potentially catcher, they have the lineup to do it. The Washington Nationals could be a playoff team in 2025. Now, in my opinion, the third best team in the division is still the New York Mets. I think the Mets really didn't get better in this offseason. I think they got worse. They go out and sign Juan Soto. Congratulations, you signed a guy who's going to be DHing full-time in about 8 years. His contract's going to age very, very bad. You look at the contracts of, for example, Albert Pujols with the Angels, right? Chris Davis with the Baltimore Orioles. This is what that Juan Soto's deal is going to end up looking like, because at this point in his career, he is a great hitter. And that's something he's going to have for the remainder of his career. His defense is one of the worst in Major League Baseball as the right field position. When you look at the metrics, he's not a good defender. His bat is elite. It might be the best in baseball. His metrics defensively are trash. They're terrible. And that really doesn't work well when you age. It's easier for him to play right field at Yankee Stadium because of the short porch. Shitty fields, right field is a much bigger right field than Yankee Stadium, so Juan Soto's going to have to get used to playing in those conditions, and really I think he's going to struggle on the defensive side to the point where he might be DHing at points for a majority of the 2025 season for the Mets. And besides that, they have a good lineup. They missed a glue guy at Jose Iglesias. They didn't bring him back. Jeff McNeil is your starting second baseman. I don't know how much I would trust Jeff McNeil as my starting second baseman, but besides that, the Mets do have a good lineup. The problem I have with the New York Mets is their pitching. They got significantly worse when it comes to their pitching for 2024. They have Sean Manaea. They re-signed him. You have to bet on Sean Manaea being a very good pitcher, an ace pitcher, right, after rejuvenating his career, right? But you saw how bad Sean Manaea was in the first half, really, until the London series in early June for the Mets in those first two and a half months, right? He changed something up, but he was really bad. So if you get that Sean Manaea for the first half or even most of the season, the Mets are not in a good position because they don't have Luis Severino anymore. He went to Oakland, right? He signed a 3-year deal there. So the Mets really have to figure out how they're going to build a rotation. Kodai Senga made more starts in the postseason last year than he did in the regular season. That's because of injuries. He made one start, got injured in that start, didn't start again until the playoffs, where he only went 2 innings, started again in the NLCS, got rocked, barely made it out of the first inning, right? So the Mets' rotation is not a good rotation. You're banking on a guy like Clay Holmes, who's been a bullpen guy for a majority of his career. He was the closer for the Yankees for the last 3, 4, 5 seasons, to be a starter, even though he really hasn't been a starter in his career, right? You're banking on a Griffin Canning, who's been traded a couple times this offseason, who hasn't really found his footing as a everyday, a rotation guy on a contending team because he hasn't been an opportunity to contend. David Peterson, for most part of for the second half of last season, was a bullpen guy working out of the bullpen. They're going to rely on Tyler McGill, who isn't, a rotation guy for a contending team. They signed Frankie Montas on a $17 million deal. He's now out for the beginning of the season. He might not pitch until May or June with his injury, and his type of injury could be even longer than what they're looking at. It's a lat injury. It could be even longer than what they're looking at. So the Mets rotation is absolutely garbage. Their bullpen is just okay. It's not better than the Braves, and it's not better than the Phillies. Really, I look at the Mets, and I compare them to the two teams that are better than them. None of their positions are better than the Phillies. You could or the Braves. The only one I could really say is better than both the Phillies and the Braves is that shortstop with Francisco Lindor. But besides that, you can't really say they're better than both teams at one position. Maybe you could argue Juan Soto is better than Ronald Acuna Jr. Maybe in 2025 he will be, but history has shown that Ronald Acuna Jr. is a very good player. The Mets signed a guy for 15 years, $765 million, who's never won an MVP. Shohei Ohtani didn't even get $765 million, and he's now a three-time MVP. He's won back-to-back MVPs, and he can pitch. Last time I checked, Juan Soto cannot pitch yet, unless he learns how to do it. He's not a pitcher. He's going to be majority DH, and his defense is pitiful right now, especially his metrics are not good. And it really hurts the Mets signing a guy like that for that much money for that length of time. The Yankees were able to go and get three very all-star level players for the money that they didn't use on Juan Soto. They still had a lot of money left over that they didn't use on Juan Soto. Well, got Cody Bellinger, Devin Williams, and Max Fried all after losing out on Soto. So you look at the logistics, it's going to look really bad for the Mets in a couple of years if they don't win a World Series, if they don't win the division, if they did all this money to go get Juan Soto. They also re-signed Pete Alonso, which is a really interesting deal. The Mets are contenders potentially to give Vladimir Guerrero Jr., whether it's at the deadline or this upcoming offseason. So they end up falling back on Alonso for $30 million this year. When he had a down year last year, can we rebound from that? If he does, the Mets, their lineup gets better. But right now, if he has another bad year, the Mets are not in a good position. Because now you're paying first baseman $30 million to hit 30 home runs, but he's also not going to have a high average. He's probably going to back up Juan Soto, but what does that do for the Mets lineup? It makes them weaker towards the end. You have to figure out where you're going to place everybody. It's going to be interesting to see how Carlos Mendoza decides to have this lineup set up. He had Vientos hitting in the 2 holes during the postseason, which worked out. Nimmo with the 3-hole. I would guess they would put Soto in the 4, but they could also put Soto in the 3, leave Alonso at the 4, Nimmo at the 5, or Nimmo at the 2, and Vientos at the 5. But we'll see what Mendoza decides to do when it comes to opening day when they play the Houston Astros. But I think the Mets, when it comes to their pitching, they're like the Baltimore Orioles. Their lineup is fantastic. The pitching is going to lose them a lot of games this year. The games they can't really afford to slip up in this really rough National League and the National League East. The Mets have a tendency for choking. You look back at 2022 when they choked away the division to the Atlanta Braves, 2007 when they choked away the division to the Phillies. Haven't won a division in 10 years. The Mets, they're not a good team right now. They haven't been a good team in a while. They have to be better than the Phillies and the Braves, and right now they aren't better than the Phillies and Braves. That's why I can't see them winning the division. They're going to have a tough road to the playoffs, really, if they don't win the division, especially if the Braves have a better record than them. Then you're fighting against teams like the Padres. You're fighting against teams like the Diamondbacks, the Giants, the Cubs, the Brewers to make that final wild card spot. Honestly, I could see the Nationals being better than the Mets this year because the pitching is that much better to make up for the games that could be lost on the pitching side that the Mets will lose. So I think the Mets are in a really bad position. That's why I have them third right now in the National League East. Right now, second in the National League East for me is the Atlanta Braves. They made some moves this offseason, right? They really made one move, and that was Jurickson Profar, but it feels like when you get a star back like Ronald Acuna Jr., it feels like you are making a move somehow, some way. Ronald Acuna Jr. is one of the best players in Major League Baseball, right? He's had his moments where he has struggled, but at the end of the day, he's still one of the best players in Major League Baseball. And the Braves, what was so impressive about last year, they were able to make the playoffs as the 5th seed in the National League without Acuna for majority of the year and without Spencer Strider for the year besides 2 starts. And they really were able to put together a solid squad. Chris Sale won the National League Cy Young last year, whether it's deserved or not. He had a very good season. He won the Triple Crown in the National League. He is a guy who, will he have regression? He's not young. He's old. He's older for baseball, right? So will he have a significant regression? And if he has a regression, how costly will it be toward the Atlanta Braves when it comes to their rotation? Ronaldo Lopez had a sub-2 ERA as a starter last year, but again, his health failed towards the end of the year, right? How will he stack up in the with his regression potentially with the Atlanta Braves. Spencer Swallenbach, I think, is going to be a future ace of the Atlanta Braves. He's a very, very good pitcher. I think he's going to be set up for a lot more success this year. I can even see him being a potential all-star this upcoming year, and then they potentially get Strider back halfway through the year, if not towards the end of the year, when they're in the playoff race. Because the Atlanta Braves, no matter who they have on the field recently, they're going to find a way to make the playoffs. Their lineup is still very good. They're missing the shortstop, which is the biggest thing they're missing. There's going to be shortstops on the market at the trade deadline. You have Jerks and Profar out there in left field, which makes your outfield that much better. Because when Acuna comes back, your outfield is Profar, Michael Harris, and Ronald Acuna Jr. That's one of the best outfields in Major League Baseball. So the Braves are putting themselves in a position to contend for a division this year and potentially go back to the World Series champions back in 2021. From 2018 to 2023, they won the National League East, right? They were the best team in the National League East. Last year, they fell behind because of injuries, but they still had an impressive season. So the Atlanta Braves are set up for success in 2025 if they can stay healthy. If they can't stay healthy, it's going to really fall apart for them. Almost how it did last year. They were able to rebound, but if they can't stay healthy, the Atlanta Braves are in a very bad position in 2025. And for the final team in the National League East, who I think will be the National League East champion for the second straight year, the Philadelphia Phillies. They come into 2025. They didn't really lose any pieces in their lineup, especially when you look at their main lineup of guys and also their rotation. They did lose Chef Hoffman this offseason. They also lost Carlos Estevez this offseason. But besides that, the Philadelphia Phillies are running it back for another year. This could be the last year for the Phillies with this, main core of guys. And I look at this team and I say they're good enough to go back to the World Series like they did in 2022. This is a very good Phillies team. As much as they fell apart during the postseason last year, this team is still really, really good. When you have Bryce Harper, you're going to contend. When you have Trey Turner, you're going to contend. Kyle Schwarber right now is one of the best leadoff hitters in baseball. He set the record last year for most home runs out of the leadoff spot. Nick Castellanos is one of the underrated players really in Major League Baseball. He's a really good right fielder, especially when it comes to his hitting. His defense struggles at times, but his hitting is really good when it comes to right fielders. He's a very underrated player. At times, Bryson Stott is an underrated second baseman. I would say he's probably the third best second baseman in the division. Alec Boehm had a rough second half of last year, led him to being benched in the postseason. But again, he was an all-star last year. Trey Turner, an all-star last year. Right, so the Phillies have the pieces. They have the best. They have, I would say, one of the best rotations in baseball. You could argue who's 1, 2, 3, but they're a top 3 rotation in baseball, along with the Mariners and Dodgers right now. And you look at the Phillies, I'd say they could win about 95 to 97 games, around that point where they were last year when it comes to winning games, and really pushing the limit to where they were, potentially going on a deeper and deeper run. Right, they got stopped last year in the National League Division Series. Year before they were in the National League Championship Series, they were 1 win away from going to the World Series, where they were in 2022, where they were 2 wins away from being world champions. So the Phillies have the roster, they have the capability to do it. Their bullpen, it did take a step back from last year, where you lose a guy like Jeff Hoffman. It's going to take a step back, but they still have a very good rotation. The bullpen. The rotation is absolutely incredible. You start off with who should have been Cy Young last year in the National League and Zach Wheeler. You also had a guy like Christopher Sanchez who had a very, very good 2024, which really was his coming out party. He got an extension last year. Aaron Nola is one of the better consistent pitchers in Major League Baseball. He's going to go out there every 5th day. He's probably going to throw 5-6 innings somehow, some way, no matter how he's pitching. He's one of the most reliant pitchers and most consistent pitchers in Major League Baseball. You have Ranger Suarez, which until early June, he was probably the National League Cy Young. He had an incredible first 2 months of the season. And you had a guy like Jesus Luzardo, who has postseason experience in 2023, had close to a 3 ERA for the Miami Marlins, was their ace as they went on the postseason run. So the Phillies have the team to do it this year. They blew their best chance was in 2023. This year, I think they have a very good chance. It's going to be tough. The National League is a stacked league with the Dodgers, Padres, Diamondbacks, Mets. I wouldn't even say the Mets, but the Braves, Cubs, Brewers. Those are teams that all can contend in 2025. and be in the World Series. So the Phillies are going to have competition, but they have a very good team and the roster to do it. So out of these 5 teams, here are my standings for them. 5, Miami, I would say they win about 62 games this year. Washington, I think they win about 75 at number 4. 3 is the Mets. I think they win 84 games this year. 2, the Braves win 90 games, and the Phillies win 95 games and win the National League Division for the second consecutive year. But that will do it for my predictions and preview of the 2025 season for the National League East. Make sure to like and subscribe and turn on post notifications so you never miss when I upload a video or go live, which I will be doing on Sunday when the Phillies take on the Baltimore Orioles at 1:05 Eastern Time. Spring trade action right here on Big Fan Sports. So make sure to check in for that. But thank you for watching episode number 2 of the Rounding Third podcast. I'm Jaden Harper, and I'll see you next time.